Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And welcome to the City of Albuquerque's Affordability Roundtable. My name is Rada. I am the manager of the Office of Financial Empowerment within the City of Albuquerque's Office of Equity and Inclusion, and we welcome you here this afternoon. We are here to discuss affordability, debt, and frankly, hope. Thank you for taking the time to join this important discussion with us. Today brings together leaders, partners, advocates, and community members who share a commitment to addressing the challenges that affect the affordability and well-being of individuals and families in our community. I want to bring up first our director of the Office of Equity and Inclusion, Director Dillon Shije. Director Shije's leadership advances equity, access, and opportunity for all citizens of Albuquerque through collaboration, innovation, and community engagement. Please help me welcome to the podium Director Dillon Shije.
Thank you, Rada. Good morning, everyone. Good to see all your lovely faces, and welcome, as Rada shared, Albuquerque's Affordability Roundtable. And I just want to thank you all for joining us for this important conversation of debt, affordability, and the future of economic opportunity here in Albuquerque and across New Mexico. And I would like to begin by recognizing our partners who helped make today convening possible. We have Protect Borrowers. You give me a hand raise. And also the Office of Consumer Protection and the Office of Financial Empowerment, and the many nonprofits, community government, education, and service organizations represented here today. And I also want to acknowledge the leaders joining us, including New Mexico State Treasurer Laura Montoya, down here. Albuquerque City Councilor Stephanie Tejas, and City Councilor Nicole Rogers, and our colleagues from Protect Borrowers and the many advocates and practitioners who work every day to support families navigating financial challenges. And at the Office of Equity and Inclusion, we understand that financial stability is deeply connected to community well-being. When families struggle with debt, rising costs, and barriers to opportunity, the impacts extend beyond household finances and affect health, education, housing, and overall quality of life. That is why today's conversation matters. It brings together leaders from different sectors to better understand the challenges facing our residents and explore solutions that help create pathways to stability and prosperity. It is now my honor to introduce Albuquerque's Executive Director of Public Safety, Raul Bujanda. Raul leads the city's public safety enterprise of Albuquerque's Community Safety, the Albuquerque Fire and Rescue Department, and the Albuquerque Police Department, and brings a collaborative approach to addressing the issues that affect our community. He understands that creating safer communities requires more than emergency response. It requires strong partnerships, prevention, and addressing the underlying conditions that impact people's lives. So please join me in welcoming Executive Director Raul Bujanda.
Good morning, everyone. So thank you. I don't want to repeat the thanks that Dillon said, but I want to just make sure that I am recognizing the Protect Borrowers who I just met today. Thank you for all the hard work that you do. AFT New Mexico, Office of Consumer Protection, Office of Financial Empowerment, Treasurer Laura Montoya, and Councilors Stephanie Tejas and Rogers. I just saw you walk in. You snuck in on me. And all our community partners. You know, when we're talking about fraud, it kind of takes me back a little bit to my role previously as the SAC here in New Mexico for the last 5 years before I took on this role. And you see all levels of fraud. And the worst kind of fraud is that individual, right? That individual that is probably the most vulnerable because they fall for a scam. They fall for the things that you try to prevent through education that we all try to make sure that our that they're learning and we're leaning into. But the reality is that you can't reach to everyone. And it's just that one interaction for that one person that has worked their whole life and that eventually ends up retiring, that you see that are the worst cases because you see them lose their whole life savings. And those are the ones that we need to go ahead and remember and try to protect. Listen to them. And it's closer to us than we actually think. You know, most people think that's something that happens to our neighbor or someone we might know that's close. But sometimes it's just our own family. Think about that aunt or uncle, even our own parents that we kind of lose touch a little bit because we get busy with our lives. And they go on and they're living their life. But they don't have the know-how that all of you have because of the work that you do or because of the experiences that you have to kind of defend yourselves from these types of fraud. I had an aunt who, same thing. My uncle had passed away. He worked in the smelting industry and died of cancer. And then she has a huge family. She had 7 kids. And my Aunt Connie, she worked her whole life, retired. She was an accountant. But it was one of those that the kids went off. They lived their own lives. They got married. They were going to school. Kind of forgot about their mom. We forgot about our Aunt Connie. And my mom would always tell me, because when I would talk, because they were very close, her and Connie, and my mom would always tell me, you know, she's working again. Yeah, she got a job online, and she's doing all this accounting work. You know, my Aunt Connie was already 85 at the time, so it seemed kind of odd that she was working. But my mom would tell me, like, even she's gonna pay for some of my bills. She's gonna take me on a trip because she's gonna make all this money through this job that she's been working on. And unfortunately, because I am no different than anyone else, too busy in my day to kind of stop and think, what's going on with my Aunt Connie? That eventually I talked to my mom, something doesn't sound right. And when was the last time you talked to her? Well, it's been a while. She kind of lost touch. When we finally got my cousins to go and reach out to their mom and us to do the same, she lived just in El Paso, wasn't even that far away. Yeah, that's when we learned, because eventually the person becomes the victim, gets the shame that goes with being defrauded for everything that they had. So all the money that she had received from the death of my uncle was gone. All of her retirement that she had done, all of her life savings, gone because she got taken for this scam, because the scam was, you keep paying us money and eventually there's this huge return. And to be legitimate, we're giving you all this work that you're doing because it's giving you value and worth that she felt that she needed because she didn't have anymore because she was alone. So let's not forget about those individuals. Let's not forget about our Aunt Connies or even our own parents, because they are the ones that are being targeted. They are the ones that are the most vulnerable. We always think about our children, most definitely, always thinking about our children. Don't forget about those who really kind of set everything in motion for all of us to be here. Built the foundation of where it is that we stand. So let's not forget about them, because things will happen. They're the ones that we're trying to protect when we're here in these types of settings. So thank you very much for having me here today. I always go off script, so I didn't say anything of what I was supposed to say. So forgive me for that from the mayor's office. But today's conversation, I think, will help us to kind of really start thinking about those individuals that need the most help. So thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, a part of the conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure how we got on, there we go, okay. Okay, I just want to give a little bit of a shout out, if I may, to obviously our OEI team, our team members who are in the room. I'm seeing at least one. I know that Vanessa's here as well. If you could just please stand. I have to recognize you, Beatrice, Vanessa, because you do such incredible work in our communities. And I just want to thank you publicly. And also just a special shout out to an acknowledgement to our interns who may be in the room and supporting us and working with us, especially for the summer. They may be out at the registration desk, but we have to lift them up as well. They're here for us and with us for the summer, and I hope they have the best summer that they've ever had in their entire life. So thank you so much. And I keep doing that. So you heard who was here in the room, but it is my distinct honor to actually introduce them as they come up to give their remarks. So please help me welcome the Honorable Laura Montoya. New Mexico's State Treasurer, who is dedicated to safeguarding the state's financial resources while expanding the economic opportunity and financial empowerment for New Mexicans across the state. And let me just say, in terms of equity and inclusion, she is also a woman. Of that, what I am very proud. Please help me welcome to this podium our State Treasurer, our New Mexico State Treasurer, Laura Montoya.
Buenos dias, good morning, everyone. I was hoping to scare her, but she didn't even skip a beat at all. So I'm Laura Montoya. I have the distinct honor of being your state treasurer, and a lot of us in this room have partnered together throughout the last 3.5 years on financial fitness and a couple of other items. And so I'm going to try to stick to the talking points because everything that we need to talk about today includes this portion of discussion, because we have a 60-day legislative session coming up in January, and this room needs to be ready to go together as one. So before I start, I need to thank everyone for being here, for caring about this enough to be present and to be doing the work that you do every day. Office of Financial Empowerment, Office of Consumer Protection, Protect Borrowers, and of course, my closer partners, the City of Albuquerque's Office of Equity and Inclusion and Albuquerque, for facilitating the conversation. Equipping families, oh, I'm so sorry, Ms. Moss. Okay. Equipping families with the resilience to withstand the financial uncertainty we are all facing is more important than ever in this moment. It is incredibly encouraging to see so many leaders, advocates, community members gather to explore impactful solutions that will not only ease financial burdens, but actively expand opportunity for New Mexicans. We are in an unprecedented time in our lives. There's economic chaos, the federal market, the volatility, the uncertainty. States, municipalities, businesses, and especially working families are all being affected by it. We sometimes forget what has happened in the last year, but House Resolution 1, also known as the Big Beautiful Bill, enacted the largest cuts to Medicaid and SNAP in the United States. And that matters, especially here in New Mexico. It's projected to reduce Medicaid spending by nearly $1 trillion, and food stamps or SNAP benefits, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, by nearly 187 over the next 10 years. Why does that matter? Well, here in New Mexico, nearly half of New Mexicans are enrolled in Medicaid, and 72% of all babies are born into New Mexico are born into Medicaid. More than a fifth, 21.5% of New Mexicans rely on SNAP to stay fed. I'm not sharing these figures because I want to be negative Nancy, but rather to publicly acknowledge the reality New Mexicans are facing and the obstacles we are being met with from the federal level so that we can maximize the effectiveness of the solutions we work through today. After all, you cannot treat an illness without understanding its full scope, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The truth is there is hope. Despite surging gas and grocery costs, despite volatile job markets, despite the tariff aftermath, and despite the weakened transparency surrounding public data collection and sharing, New Mexico is keeping its promise by living up to its tradition of resilience and strength in difficult times. Aside from the work that has been done by our legislature and governor to mitigate the impacts of these budget cuts, such as passing the Medicaid Trust Fund account and distributing tens of millions of dollars in state-funded food benefits during lapses in SNAP services, there are a number of feasible solutions that the State Treasurer's Office has been championing, aimed at empowering New Mexicans to maximize their own resilience in the face of economic hardship. For example, one of the most active initiatives is implementing financial fitness as a high school graduation requirement for all New Mexicans. Financial fitness is what our office calls financial literacy, because it is not a measure of ability. You are not illiterate because you don't know it or understand it well, but rather it's a muscle that needs to be worked out and developed. Financial fitness is a skill that is critical, yet also critically lacking across not only our state, but this nation. According to Wallet Hub studies, which analyzed both financial education programs and financial knowledge and habits, New Mexico ranks 43rd in financial fitness. Our office is traveling across the state to make sure that we're equipping our children with the tools and information that they need to acquire knowledge and improve money habits in adulthood. And guess what? Since we started this about 2.5 years ago, we have managed to secure, along with many of our partners in the state, financial fitness education as a requisite for 63% of New Mexico public students across 53 school districts statewide, and that number is still growing. The goal is 75% by January, because if you recall, the legislature, by one vote, refused to include financial literacy as a graduation requirement. We tried passing it in Senate Ed. We lost by one vote. So we said to Senator Mo Maestas, we want you to put it up again in the Senate. We did, and we lost there by one vote. And unfortunately, both your Senate and your House education chairs did not support the initiative of it being a requirement. Instead, it's a local option. So outside of managing over $20 billion and overseeing $160 billion, like I have nothing else to do, I needed to go all around our state so that it doesn't matter where you grew up or what district you live in or what zip code you go to school in, that you have the opportunity to have financial literacy. It is critical, especially in New Mexico, because many of us grew up poor. Many of us didn't have somebody to teach us what stocks and bonds were, or that we even had the opportunity to participate in them. Some of us were living paycheck to paycheck. Some of us help manage the money for our grandparents or for our great-grandparents or for people that are our caregivers, and they don't yet know a lot about financial fitness. And so the one place that is equal for everyone to be able to learn it is in our schools. This is something that I would like all of us to partner in. With an increased share of New Mexicans learning smart money management habits and wealth-building techniques, we're empowering New Mexicans to better withstand unexpected cost surges and navigate economic instability brought by policy decisions beyond their direct control. Financial fitness alone is not a silver bullet. It's not bulletproof vest to solve every financial challenge, many of which are systemic, but it provides potent means for families to brace and protect themselves in uncertain times, which we are definitely feeling today. Even deeper than the ability to manage money well is having money to manage. Besides imparting financial fitness education and resources, our office is focused on creating opportunities for wealth building and long-term financial security by investing directly in people. Affordability is not simply a cost problem, it is also a wealth problem. Families with savings, assets, and investments are better able to withstand economic shocks than families living paycheck to paycheck, though we know how to make $1 out of 15 cents. That is why our office believes financial fitness must be paired with wealth-building opportunities. One way we are doing this is through baby bonds. The concept is simple. It takes money to make money. If you're familiar with a 529 account, it's similar to a 529 account, except that you have to have money in order to put your money into a 529 account for education or other purposes. Because costs are rising and significantly more rapidly than wages, investing directly into our residents through baby bonds will bridge the wealth divide and provide real, meaningful opportunity. And here's how it works for those that are not familiar. An initial seed investment of $7,000 per child would be made into every child born in New Mexico 2 parents who have resided in the state for a significant period of time. That amount, invested into an overall pool, would be invested by the State Investment Council, accruing interest over the course of 18+ years until the child becomes an adult. Once that child reaches their 18th birthday, the child's investment will have grown to approximately $20,000 to $23,000, factoring in interest rate considerations of 7%. If the child does not use the money at 18, because in New Mexico, college is free, they can keep investing it or use a portion of it. If they kept it in there to continue to accrue an investment, by the age of 35, it would be about $74,000 to $175,000. By the time they're 65, it can go up to $568,000. That's called bridging the wealth divide. That is called building generational wealth. Now, I know many of you in this room are thinking, what an outlandish idea. Giving tens of thousands of dollars to an 18-year-old is incomprehensible. We were all 18 once, I would never do that. However, the beauty of baby bonds is that it's designed specifically to build wealth, not to be spent on impulse spending or non-essential purposes. There's guardrails to place to ensure that any expenditure made from a baby bond account would be made only on State Treasurer's Office approved expenses that build wealth directly or expand opportunity, such as home or property purchases, post-secondary education, trade school, small business creation and entrepreneurship, and a vehicle to get to and from work, and even retirement. New Mexico has the second largest permanent fund in the nation, accounting for more than $71 billion in assets. We invest in industry, we invest in venture, we invest in developmental projects, both in the United States and outside of the country. We invest in real estate, we invest in stocks, we invest in everything. Why can't we invest in our babies being born in New Mexico? It would require $700 million. When I go to the SIC tomorrow, we usually deploy at least $1 billion almost every month. We have $71 billion. We have $11 billion in our child account. Why would we not be able to make an investment of $700 million for the approximate number of 23,000 babies being born in New Mexico every year, for them to then have the $20,000 to $25,000? I'm confident that if we allocate a fraction of our public funds directly to the people contributing to the state's wealth, it will generate lasting returns for our people and our state's economy for generations to come. Because as you're investing in families and in community, you're also taking an opportunity to stop investing in incarceration and in suicide and in mental health issues, because now people have sustainability. Imagine when you had your child or your child had a child and you wanted the best for them. You wanted all of the opportunities that they could have, but you knew there was limitations because you had limitations. You pay property taxes, you pay gross receipts taxes, you pay every other kind of taxes that are to contribute to your economy and your community. So what if the government finally came back and said to you, we're investing $7,000 in your baby? How would that change the morale of the relationship between government and community? When you invest in the most sacred portion of our lives, which is our children and our youth, what you're doing is you are building your economy. You are building a healthier base for the future. When we give our children an advantaged starting point, we are creating the pathway to freer economic mobility and the condition to every individual to have a safer net they can climb up safely. As a state, we cannot pull the ladder up from behind us when our residents built that ladder. Our state is incredibly wealthy, and our residents should be too. There should not be a disconnect. But right now, there is a disconnect between how much money we have and how effectively that money is being utilized to materially bring New Mexicans up. I do believe our office's role is simple and it's to manage money, of course, but not just to manage money. I believe our role is to build wealth for the state and facilitate that same wealth building for those who make the state beautiful, vibrant, and special. The affordability crisis is not a single issue. It is housing, it's healthcare, it's groceries, it's debt. You just saw your papers today. I want you to look at the credit card debt on there. For the first time in our nation's history, we have more credit card debt than we have ever had in the past. 80% have credit card debt. 1 in 8 credit card borrowers are severely delinquent, and over 1 in 4 credit card borrowers are using over 75% of their credit limit. Therefore, our solutions must be multifaceted as the challenge affordability poses. That is why it is so powerful that we are all in here right now addressing these issues in real time, whether that means promoting financial fitness, expanding access to reliable banking services, or directly supporting families in financial hardship. Our goals overall are the same. Each of us in this room has a specialty. I call it a superpower that serves community uniquely and powerfully. No single elected official, department, agency, organization, or financial institution can solve these challenges alone. While we cannot control every policy decision made in Washington, we can control how we prepare and how we respond. By being here, we're choosing to be proactive instead of reactive. So thank you for being here today, and I'm looking forward to collaborating with each of you to improve quality of life for every New Mexican.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. We appreciate you as always. You always come through most appropriately. I just want everybody to know that lunch will be provided. It will be coming in at some point. And so I may have to take some moderation privilege, and so don't be surprised. Is lunch coming through? Lunch is coming through now. So let's let them set up lunch, and then we will invite you to get your lunch because we want this to be a working one. So thank you for your patience and understanding with that. It is also now my privilege to welcome Councilor Stephanie Tellis, a dedicated Albuquerque City Councilor whose commitment to public service and community engagement helps advance policies that strengthen neighborhoods and improve quality of life for residents across this beautiful city. Please help me welcome to this podium our Councilor, Stephanie Tellis.
Thank you. There's a sign back there that says no alcohol beyond this point, and I was like, wait, let me double check. I was just on vacation, so it's just water, I promise. So I'm really excited and thrilled to be here. Thank you so much to the Office of Financial Empowerment, Consumer Protection, Equity and Inclusion, to AFT, my union, AFT. Yeah, I am in a union. I am the treasurer of UAUNM, the faculty union at the university. And so I'm really thrilled to always be where my own union is offering support. You know, I'm really also very excited that we're having this conversation on debt and affordability during lunch because conversations like this are a lot easier when we know sandwiches are coming, for me anyway, right? So I know that we talk a lot about debt and affordability and what that sort of looks like, and you know, I'm looking at this paper here. It says, credit card borrowers are severely delinquent, using over 75% of their credit limits. And I was watching the news the other day. There was a gentleman on there just talking about how great the economy is doing right now. You know, credit card spending is through the roof. And I was like, sir, I think you are missing the underlying point there. That does not mean what you think it means. I felt like Vincenzi from A Princess Bride. I don't think that word means what you think it means. You know, it's like, yeah, credit card spending is through the roof. And it's because people can't afford to buy things that they need, and I guarantee you, if you look at those credit card bills, it's groceries, and it's utility bills, and it's basic, hygiene, it's diapers, it's tampons, it's whatever, things that we need to just survive and live our daily lives. These aren't extravagant, trips. People aren't just trying to rack up, credit card points here. And so I think that's a big tell that you can see between sort of, these haves and the have-nots in the world that we live in. And, when I was about 20 years old, maybe, I worked at a law firm. And I was an office manager there, and I was visiting my sister, who lived in Florida at the time, and I got a phone call, very frantic phone call from one of the managing partners, and he was just like, hey, do you remember a check coming in for $15,000? And I was like, I think I'd remember a check coming in for $15,000. He was like, it would have been for an appeal, and I was like, nope, nothing like that came in. What happened eventually was one of the other partners had been embezzling funds from the law firm, and he embezzled a lot of money here. He was signing on new clients, taking their money, depositing those funds into his own personal account, and then not filing any of these cases, right? And so this poor gentleman who missed his appeal deadline and was now trying to find out where his money was. And one of the things that really frustrated me here was there was a lot of victims here, and obviously some were hurt much worse than others, but I was also a victim because that managing partner was accusing me of losing the checks or not depositing the checks. There was a point where it was like, well, it must have been our stupid 20-year-old office manager. I don't even know why she works here, and blah, blah, blah. And I remember getting deposed by some very, scary, intimidating lawyers, and sitting there in my $17 hot pink, there's a theme, a hot pink blazer from Forever 21, being deposed, and just feeling like this is so wrong. This is just not right. So many lives are being impacted here because there's a dude who can't live within his own means, right? And then he's blaming other people. So no accountability, no integrity. It took years, but eventually he lost his license. And he was, formerly a well-respected man in the community. He used to be a judge down in Las Cruces, and he lost his license, and when that came out in the bar bulletin, it was like, you're feeling sort of vindicated here, because so many lies for so many years about this. And it was at that point, I was like, man, we have to do something about this. And I wanted to go to law school, and I realized, well, I can't afford to go to law school. Like, if that's going to be me, I wanted to be a public defender, and could you imagine having to pay law school bills on a public defender's salary? So I became an accountant. And I went into fraud and forensic accounting. And in my early 30s, when I worked at Wells Fargo, I worked at Wells Fargo, one of the big, scary, bad banks, which, by the way, today had their second rally, CWA, to have a second location, organize a union here in Albuquerque. Wells Fargo had the first union organized here in Albuquerque, and now we're going to have hopefully a second. So, but when I was at Wells Fargo, I was an internal auditor. I worked in the back shop operations. I did a lot of work surrounding CFPB regulations, and man, CFPB regulations, boy, do I love those. Boy, do I love that regulation. Regulation Z is probably my favorite one. 12 CFR, I have it memorized. Part 1026, the Truth in Lending Act. It's where I fell in love with, folks like Elizabeth Warren, who really created this agency and this entity dedicated to really protecting consumers. And I just loved it. And the whole point of it really is just to provide simple things, very simple things, like standardized information, costs and terms that consumers can understand, that are provided to people before they sign on the dotted lines, those type of things. Very, basic instruments of consumer protection. And a lot of opposition to this type of work is always like, well, we should let the free market handle it, and the bad actors will go away because the good actors will hold them accountable. And I'm just like, do you know where we live? I don't think Alex Smith anticipated 3 hands of economic stability, right? So we as government officials have to create these type of regulations, because people aren't going to be held accountable by their peer corporations, right? That is our duty. We have to come forward to ensure that we are creating the floor, right? The floor. And we're not setting, things that are causing difficulty for businesses to enter the market. No, this is the floor, right? And I always tell folks, the law is literally the lowest form of ethical behavior that we can follow, right? And so it just became so important to me. When I had been at Wells Fargo, I was also in charge of consumer lending portfolio, which was interesting because I'd be the one that get all the phone calls that said, hey, these people are requesting their fee be reversed because of XYZ, right? And I was like, cool, reverse it. I looked at myself as like a Robin Hood in Wells Fargo, because this was all happening, mind you, during the same time that Wells Fargo was in trouble for opening accounts without people's approval and stuff. So, and one of the masterminds, I guess, behind that process had actually been transferred to my division and was my second level up boss at the time. And so even then, at that point, it became even more important to me to forgive all fees as much as I possibly could if they came in front of me. Now, I wasn't doing anything that wasn't outside of the rules that, Wells Fargo didn't already allow me to do, but they certainly wanted a little bit more attention paid to those forgiving of the fees. But I was just like, you know what, these are consumers. Let's go ahead and forgive them. So I don't think my line of business was winning any revenue increase awards that year, I'll tell you that. But one of the things is, again, is we have to protect consumers in any way that we can, in any position that we're able to. And that is kind of where my line of thinking was coming in my role there. I left Wells Fargo because I got a phone call one day from our former state auditor, Brian Colon, and he said, hey, would you like to join my team? And I said, heck yeah, I would. And that's when I became the director of the Government Accountability Office for the state of New Mexico under Auditor Colon. And it was there that I realized, and through my work, doing government accountability. And it wasn't just at state level, right? We audited over 1,000 entities annually in New Mexico with a staff of about 35. Okay, so it's a very lean department with a lot of work to do. And we oversee, municipalities and counties and every state agency. Any organization that receives and expends public funds has oversight through the state auditor's office. And it was in my role there that I understood finally the most important thing that government can do is to make sure that every single public dollar reaches the people it was intended to help. That is what I took away during my time there at the auditor's office. And, because I wrote a lot of risk advisories. They're still up on the website about elected official travel requirements and what we have to do if we're going to be traveling and how we are obligated to spend and use the people's money when we're on travel. I wrote advisories about how charter schools are really, a lot of charter schools in the state of New Mexico. If you pull any district audit report in the state of New Mexico and you look at where all of the most findings are coming from, they are coming from charter schools. And I can tell you it's because charter school foundations are basically shell companies for charter schools. And what we are seeing is PED is sending charter school, and not all charter schools, not all, got to throw that in there, right? But PED will send these charter schools money based off of enrollment. They get their funds, and they then take those funds and they move it into their foundation. Once it's in the foundation, there is no more state oversight. So we have no idea how those funds are being spent. Not a clue. I have asked the legislature what they're going to do about it. I've heard crickets. We have a lot of folks talking about, and this is millions and millions of dollars. And you can see just here in Albuquerque, we have several charter schools and several individuals that you have seen, where it's just a family running a single charter school. And you wonder why an individual with no educational background whatsoever is an executive director for a charter school taking home an annual salary of about $187,000. So again, every public dollar that reaches the people as it's intended to do, we have to make sure that we're taking care of that. There's a lot of other problems when it comes to consumer protection and consumer lending. Now, I work in the fraud world. That's what I do. I don't practice so much anymore, but I do a lot of education. I'm proud to say that I am teaching our next generation of fraud fighters at the University of New Mexico. I do teach 2 Masters of Accounting courses that are now required courses. They didn't used to be, but they are fraud examination and forensic accounting, which is so wonderful because we are actually teaching our accounting students how to look for fraud. A lot of folks will say, well, why didn't the audit find it? How many times have you asked yourself, you've seen audits or you've heard big stories about government fraud or organizational fraud or whatever it might be, and you're like, well, what were the auditors doing? Why didn't they find it? How many, raise a hand, anybody ever thought that before? Well, auditors don't find fraud, that's not their job, right? The job of an auditor is to simply review and opine on the financial records that they are provided. That's it. But because of the work of fraud fighters, because of the work of governments, because of the work of consumer protection groups like Protect Borrowers, a lot of that is changing in the professional standards realm of accounting, and now they're starting to really integrate fraud reviews into these processes, which is super, super important. One thing I can tell you, at the end of 2025, it was reported to the FTC that there was $12.5 billion of reported losses in consumer funds due to fraud. However, that is an estimate to be about only 2 to 7% of reported claims. Consumer fraud remains severely, severely underreported, and actual estimates at the end of 2025 are about $196 billion in losses due to fraud for consumers. And so what the heck can we do about that? Well, I can tell you right now, one of the top trends in consumer fraud right now is AI impersonations, cryptocurrency impersonations, and especially cryptocurrency kiosks and ATM. And what we can do about it, well, I can tell you what we can do about it. We can ban it. Right now in Albuquerque, there are 82 cryptocurrency kiosks, cryptocurrency ATMs in and around Albuquerque, and I have introduced an ordinance, and I have support of a great counselors like Councilor Rogers, thank you, to ban these cryptocurrency ATMs, because I can tell you when scammers, when fraudsters tell seniors or any other vulnerable adult to put cash into a crypto ATM, that is not innovation, that is exploitation. And so yes, there is something we can do about it, and it starts with simple things like introducing these ordinances. So I urge you, when we're back in session, to contact all of your counselors and ask them to sign on to this, because this is the #1 consumer protection issue and fraud scam affecting individuals in 2026 is these cryptocurrency kiosk scams. But again, thank you. We are going to keep the dream alive. We're going to talk about affordability and where that starts. And I'm just so grateful to be here. Again, thank you, Albuquerque Financial Empowerment, Consumer Protection, and Protect Borrows. I'm so happy to be part of this conversation with you.
I think she took my papers. Stephanie, can I have my notes? Stephanie? Counselor, can I have my notes? I think you got them.
Oh, did I take them? No, we gotta wing it.
So I am going to wing it just a little bit. So lunch is here, and we are a little bit tight on time, just a little bit, not bad. But that's what we do in the city, right? So as I introduce our facilitators, I'm going to ask, after I introduce them briefly, I'm going to ask, as they come up and do their thing, that you quietly and orderly and expeditiously get your lunch and then quietly come back to your seat, because we want this to be a working lunch to the best degree that we can. Is that okay? Everybody in agreement? All right, great. And I know that this person has been acknowledged, but I would be remiss if I just did not acknowledge again our city councilor, Nicole Rogers. Thank you so much, Councilor, for being here. Okay. Now it's my distinct privilege to introduce to you our expert facilitators for this afternoon, Amy Czulada and Jacob DuMez with Project Borrowers. Project Borrowers is a national nonprofit organization that works to protect consumers from predatory lending practices. And they also work to build an economy where debt does not limit opportunity. Amy and Jacob will provide an overview of the debt crisis faced by millions of American families, including student, credit card, auto, and medical debt. Plus, they will provide some emerging loan products that are taking advantage of desperate consumers. They will provide state, local, and national data, reviewing the policy landscape, and highlight ways that Albuquerque and New Mexico in particular can protect their borrowers, workers, and students. Please help me welcome Amy and Jacob. And we are all, as a team, are going to instruct you to go get your lunch. Enjoy your lunch, and stay in tune. Amy and Jacob.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I can tell a lot of you used to sit in the back of the classroom at school with some empty seats up front, but that is okay. I was also a kid that liked to sit in the back. Yeah, please feel free to grab lunch. We've got some great pizza options, some salads, and some drinks in the coolers. Thank you so much to the Office of Financial Empowerment and the Office of Consumer Protection, and especially our opening speakers, Director Shije, Executive Director Bujanda, Treasurer Montoya, and Councilor Tellez. Those were amazing opening remarks for this discussion, and we're really excited to be here today. So my name is Amy Czulada. I work at Protect Borrowers as our Senior Advisor for Outreach and Engagement. We are a national nonprofit that focuses solely on debt and how it affects households, and we try to tell the story about what this looks like right now. Our team was founded in 2018 during the first Trump administration. And what happened was we heard a little bit about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau this morning already. But folks from the students team at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau were basically told to stop working during that first administration and came over to our organization and founded us. And we were primarily focused on student debt for the first 7 years of our existence. And last year we rebranded to Protect Borrowers, and now we do some work in other types of debt. So credit card debt, utility debt. We're going to be doing something on medical debt later this year, auto debt. We also do some work around buy now, pay later products, which I'm sure you've been accosted with anytime you go to buy anything. But then also something called rent now, pay later products. So when you go to pay your rent and you can't afford it, they offer you an option to kind of finance it with some, really wild interest terms on those products. So I'm going to try to move through these slides very quickly because we're a little bit short on time and we want to have a discussion. Let's see. But we'll also be sharing out these slides at the end, so you'll have them for reference later on. So how is household debt holding people back from the American dream? First, what is the American dream? It's often characterized as like being able to own a home and maintain a home, but it's also about taking care of your family, right? Being able to put food on the table, getting them a good education. All those things are wrapped up in what the American dream is. I think that it's well documented that there's an affordability crisis happening right now in the United States. And I think that, you're all humans that go to the grocery store and go to the gas pump. And so you are, very well aware of like what the affordability crisis looks like each time you go to do those things. But I think a piece that's often missing from this conversation is what debt does in this conversation, right? How does debt hold us back, and how does it play into the affordability crisis? So I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I think rather than this be a personal thing that you're experiencing every day when you go to buy groceries, it's also happening at a national level and at a state level and at a city level. This is a phenomenon that is not just personal. So I think that one of the biggest things, which can be the canary in the coal mine really, is this piece on credit card debt. I think Councilor Czulada said this beautifully, that folks aren't taking extravagant vacations, they're putting groceries on credit cards. And when they can't do that, they're using buy now, pay later products to get their groceries even. And so let's just take a look at some of the data that is around right now. So we've been putting together some research with the Century Foundation on different types of debt. And so this looks at credit card debt. So we've got over 100 million Americans with $1.27 trillion in credit card debt, and almost half of those folks can't pay off their monthly balance. And so when you can't pay off your monthly balance, that interest capitalizes, and then your monthly payments get higher. And so you were already behind, and now you're falling even further behind because of that interest. The monthly payments have grown by nearly 40%, and more than 27 million Americans can't afford to pay more than their minimum payment. Folks are maxing out on their credit cards. They're utilizing over 30% of that limit, which is what's recommended, right, to keep it under your 30% limit of your available credit. And in New Mexico in particular, about a third of New Mexican borrowers aren't able to pay off their monthly credit card balance. The average balances have increased by almost 8%, and the average balances are almost $7,000. The monthly credit card payment that you're making each month is over $1,600. So that is all money that's going towards debt that you can't save to build, forget about generational wealth, like to have a savings account so that like when you have an emergency, you can take care of that emergency without having to go to a creditor. The average monthly payments have increased by over 40% since 2018, which maybe you're all feeling, as you sit here anyway, but like this is true across the board. I think next I want to talk a bit about auto debt. It was all over the news, right, when there were so many supply chain issues about, the cost of automobiles going up during the pandemic, and those prices never came down. And so what that looks like now is that we have almost 90 million Americans that owe almost $1.7 trillion in auto loan debt. The average balance is almost $34,000, and folks are paying almost $700 a month. which is nearly a 40% increase from 2018. That is just so much money to be spending towards something that is, a necessity. And I imagine it's a necessity in a state like New Mexico, where you have a large rural population. Folks need to get to work to get to pick up their kids from school. We know that the infrastructure of public transportation isn't great in this country, and so folks really need a car. This isn't a luxury anymore. This is really something that folks need in order to survive. Like most of these things, lower income borrowers often end up paying more because their credit scores aren't as good, and so they don't get as great terms on these things. And so they're paying over $700 a month on average for these auto loans. In addition, these things are interconnected, and so credit card balances grew by over 30% for middle income borrowers with auto loans compared to 17% for those without auto debt. So, if you have one form of debt, you're more likely to have another form of debt that is also holding you back. And so, taken in the aggregate, these things are really, really holding people back. Something that is also more common over the past few years is that borrowers are taking on 7-year auto terms. So it used to be, maybe more common that you would take on a 5-year loan if you couldn't, pay for your car up front. But now the terms are longer, and people are spending 20% of their monthly income on car payments. And so that's why, they have to turn to credit cards to pay for things like groceries. So 1 out of every $5 that folks earn is going towards a car payment. That's a huge chunk of your monthly income. For New Mexicans, almost 600,000 New Mexicans carry auto loan debt. The average balance is almost $36,000, and that's increased over 30% since 2018. The average car loan balance is over $30,000, and that's an increase of, above 30% since 2018. And then these new loans of 7-year terms, over 20% of folks that are buying new cars are using those 7-year terms, and those interest rates are above 10%. So this is just, really, really causing huge issues for something that is a necessity. And then just to hit it home a little bit more, so 40% of Albuquerque borrowers have auto debt, and the average debt is around $19,000. This is from Q1 of 2025 with the Federal Reserve. New Mexico ranks second for the highest debt-to-income ratio. So the average auto loan debt in New Mexico is 44% of the median household income. And then for folks in neighborhoods that have primarily people of color, 1 in 10 borrowers were severely delinquent on their auto loans, and that rises to 25% in Native American neighborhoods. So this, like most things, doesn't affect everyone equally, and we're finding that low-income borrowers and folks of color are often bearing the brunt of these things. Okay, so next I'm going to turn it over to Jacob to talk about utility debt, which I think are 2 words that should never go together, and yet here we are. So thank you, Jacob.
Thanks so much, Amy, and thank you all. Thanks for having me here today. I'm a fellow with Protect Borrowers. My background is in sort of nonprofit and city government around economic justice, asset building, consumer protection. Love being in groups like this. Spent a little over a decade at the San Francisco Office of Financial Empowerment. Was talking earlier to Director Shije and the team here about just the important connective tissue role that a city can play and that an Office of Financial Empowerment can play in bringing people together to have discussions like these. So we're not going to complete the discussion here today, but hopefully it can continue. So utility debt, and I'm going to run through these pretty quickly, because again, we will send you these, and I want to have some time for us to talk. So we're going to start with just the national picture, which is debt getting higher, bills getting higher, costs getting much, much higher. You can see that the average bills exceed $260 a month, an increase of more than 1/3 since 2022. And that means also, given the growing interconnected web of debt that consumers and families are facing, that more people are falling behind, more people are going into the red. And I would particularly point out that bottom bullet there. The average overdue balance is not small. a very significant increase in the amount that people are behind, which is just a hole that is harder to dig out of. And when you zoom in on New Mexico, you see much the same picture. Rising bills, higher bills that people are having to pay, more people falling behind, and when they're behind, having a larger amount of debt that they have to figure out how they're going to get out of. And you see there at the bottom, more than $2,000 that the average family is spending on utility costs annually. And then really a quick move through to student debt. This is near and dear to our hearts as an organization. It used to be really our primary focus. And so we will talk to you in a minute about how this conversation on student debt is going to continue tomorrow, and there's an opportunity to really ask your own questions about your own student debt or your family members or others to come and get some help. So here, looking statewide and in Albuquerque, you see the large amount of overall student debt, both in the state and, nationally, it's over $1.6 trillion. And then the number of borrowers, I really am going to skip over kind of reading through these bullet points, but what we usually say is the trend over the recent years and really past decades is more people are borrowing, they're borrowing more money, and they're having a harder time paying it back. And I think we all really understand that. But since that we have ended our sort of consumer protections from the pandemic, that paused things in place and gave people some breathing room, the picture has really not been good on the restart and the ability that people have to get a handle on this debt. So you see severe delinquency here for borrowers in Albuquerque and throughout the state, but look at where those dates are. The end of March 2025, and we compare this with going back just prior to the pandemic, but the end of March 2025, we're just barely into the Trump administration. Things have unfortunately not gotten better in the last year plus, and so we expect these numbers to have continued to rise. This is simply the last time the Federal Reserve updated the data that's widely available. And so what that gives us is really just the crazy percent increase maybe isn't even the thing that I would point to. It's the slope of that line, and this is what we see in every state. Yes?
Sorry, is this both public and private student loans?
Very good question, very good question. So this is focused on federal student loans. Federal student loans do make up about 9 out of every 10 loan dollars in overall student debt. And so we do tend to hone in most on the federal student debt, but it is important to acknowledge that private student loan debt has been rising quickly, and we expect to see some problems going forward, which I'll talk about. So thank you for that question. So the slope of this line is just what we see everywhere, which means even though we can say, hey, 1 out of 10, more than 1 out of 10 borrowers are severely delinquent, that's 90 days, 3 months behind on their debt. We see more than 9.5 million people in default nationally, but the slope tells us it's not leveling out. It's still going up, and that is certainly not a good sign. So this was like really a quick run through this debt, and what I want to say as we transition into hearing from you, your questions, your reflections on this is we could have spent obviously a lot more time going more exhaustively through the kinds of debt. We call it consumer debt. It's really personal debt, the debt that arrives on bills that we all have to figure out how to face each month. I think several of our speakers have underscored the fact that this debt is interconnected. And what I would add is that we are growing to start to use the term sort of desperation finance. And at Protect Borrowers, we're going to be doing more work where we will be using that phrase, which describes the tough times that people find themselves in. This is not, again, as previous speakers have said, this is not irresponsible people just going and splurging. This is people struggling to get by, facing higher costs of living, falling behind, not seeing wages grow fast enough to make up the difference. And so desperate folks end up having to turn to debt, which is becoming really an American answer that we need to have a real conversation about. When things get bad, we throw more debt at those things. And that includes loans making their way into your hospital office, into your rent, into every single transaction at the grocery store, at the gas station. There is continually options to can't pay now, that's okay. Just take out a loan through us. In many cases, we won't call it a loan, we'll call it something more friendly, like earned wage access, merchant cash advances. But these are loans that create debt that we have to pay back. And so where we want to transition now is to use the remaining time to have a bit of an interactive conversation. We'd love to hear from you. So what I will start is just opening this up by saying, would love to hear any questions from all of the speakers and the presentation we just kind of sprinted through here, but also your own reflections. If there's something that you feel you'd like to add to this conversation, that would be great. And then we're happy to kind of come in and prompt some additional questions, but I want to leave a sort of open space to start with. Any questions? Yes.
Hi, I'm Tessa McGrath with the Partnership for Community Action. We're a grassroots organization locally. And I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to start with, we have had the opportunity to partner with Stanford University on a local survey called the Rapid Survey. If you're familiar with it, you can Google it. They have a lot of data, and they do a really good job of pulling that raw data and helping us understand what our community is facing. And utility debt came up. And it's a question that we are not familiar with, so I really appreciate you pulling that out into this conversation. I'm curious in your work if you can tell us what are some of the solutions that communities are coming up with to battle this utility debt. Why is it happening? Like, we were a little curious why utility debt was one of the biggest hardships families are facing. And then how does the potential transition to things like private equity really change the conversation around utility debt for community members?
Thank you so much. Those are fantastic questions. I don't need to be the only one attempting to answer those questions, so I encourage others to be thinking if there's something that you want to add. For starters, I would encourage folks to go, and I would encourage you to check out at protectborrowers.org. We have some deeper dives on utility debt specifically, but also on housing and rental related debt, credit card debt, student debt, et cetera. So yes, it has been this huge increase that is all of a sudden really popping up for folks. And I think sometimes the headlines just out there in the world, right, are the impact of wars, the impact of tariffs, the impact of data centers, and this growth of reliance on our electric bills. But I would tend to jump to your latter half of your question, where you point to the interests behind utility companies, looking at the situation of these where consumers are, looking at public utility commissions that tend to have been historically friendly to utilities, have been captured by utilities so that there is a lack of sharp regulation around rate increases. I took a quick look at, rate increases throughout New Mexico. I forget the PNM maybe as the largest there, in the midst of a rate increase that relative to some maybe seems small. I think two bumps of $6 plus each per month. In some of the southern utilities here, you're seeing much more dramatic increases, and around the country, you see huge increases. And these bumps are often, we talk about the role of the state in making sure that we're spending our money responsibly. The bumps that you are seeing in utility rates and in utility bills are often just rubber stamped through as an answer to say we need to do transmission work, we need to do infrastructure work, and these are good answers. We need our infrastructure to be much stronger than it is for our public utilities. However, sometimes it's called, I think the term they like to use is gold plating your utility bill increase, which is doing relatively unnecessary work that falls just below the cap where the state public utility commission would really dig into, but enables these folks to say, oh, we just simply have to raise our rates more and pass on these bills to folks. And I think, yes, I don't want to editorialize too much, but private equity buying into utilities is incredibly dangerous. All of their motivation is to pull profit out of whatever they have invested in quickly. It is not necessarily to make strong future-looking investments and keep rates low for people. It is just the opposite. So the same impact in utilities where private equity getting in is dangerous across other areas of investments, including our public education system, including youth sports, including a number of areas where all of a sudden people are paying much, much, much more money. So what can we do about it? It is not my area of expertise. I think you can probably hear I'm not like a go deep, but I would say that in the world of utility assistance sort of programs and setups, typically people call them arrearage programs. It's the one area of debt where they've decided arrearage is the word rather than debt. And so public utility arrearage programs at the state and the city level would be a place to look and say, first of all, are these programs offering full-on debt relief, i.e. canceling some of the debt, and not just stretching it out forever and keeping terms unaffordable? So is there an actual cutting of your debt, either entirely or in some part? And then people go to arrearage management. So there's the sort of cancellation side of your debt, and then the management of your debt means, can I get onto a more affordable plan? Can you lower my monthly payments to make them affordable? And so having the community look into both how much debt cancellation is offered and then how low are the rates, or else we're setting people up to fail, are two really important things. And then I would offer for those particularly on the elected side or at the city attorney and AG level, is taking any opportunity to look at these rate increase proposals and say, hang on a sec, no, we need to talk about whether that's reasonable, whether that's actually helping things be more sustainable and affordable for our community, or whether you're just trying to like suck in the money here.
There is some management of the arrearage through PNM with their budget billing, but you have to opt into PNM's budget billing system, and it is a management process, not a forgiveness process, but that is one. That way you'll have the same exact payment every month, and at the end of the year, if you've overpaid or underpaid, you'll either get a credit or it'll go on to your next month. So budget billing is an option, but you have to opt in. Right, you cannot do, yeah.
Community solar if you're on budget billing.
Right.
Just last week you forgot when I tried.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alice Main. I work in the sustainability office at the city. And I just have a few comments. Our office touches a lot of different sectors. We mostly look at a greenhouse gas and equity lens. And of the affordability themes that I think are important to highlight here, with at least with vehicles, the cost of vehicles, we really promote density and mixed use zoning, so then people don't have to buy cars, that there's jobs co-located, near where people live and work. We also, working from home policies really help a lot of families not have to pay those energy costs. Public transit, mobile, micro mobility efforts, I think, are really great investments of public funds. We also really like to showcase the importance of car shares and van pooling and things like that. And that's stuff that, we'd love some ideas on how to amplify here in our city. We also, personally, I also really think a lot about how cars are depreciating assets. So when people go out and buy new, that component of consumer education and protection is really important. And now, especially in New Mexico, where, we have relatively affordable electricity, those EV cars are really awesome in terms of costs and cost maintenance. So those are just some items. I also, I know some folks here are aware of community solar, but that's one of the more progressive environmental bills that we have in this state. And so the more we can get this opportunity to low-income households, I think the better. I know there's some experts in the room here. And I'd also like to highlight that part of the challenges we're seeing, at least on our side, utilities thinking about building out their load is the trickiness with data centers. And I know Bernalillo County and the city of Santa Fe are passing legislation to pause the growth of data centers until more robust legislation is going forward. So I think that's something that's really exciting that we're seeing in our office that I want to offer to the room. And I think those are all my notes. Thank you.
My name is Grace Allison. I work at the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic at New Mexico Legal Aid. I'm a tax lawyer. And I was very interested in the fitness program and wonder whether it includes a tax component. That is, in my view, is tremendously important because for low-income households, the tax credits that are in the Internal Revenue Code provide about 20% of annual cash flow. So learning about tax is a very important component of financial fitness.
Hi, excuse me, I'm Lorraine. I'm part of the Livable Albuquerque Special. I can't talk today. I don't know why. Probably because I'm holding a microphone. But I'm also a studied anthropologist, and when I was studying the anthropology of language, one of the things that came up that interested me the most was jargon, how jargon is used to keep people from really fully understanding the scope of something. And I hear a lot of things like arrearage. I hear a lot of things like, there's all these terms we use to describe what is really a scam, fraud, wage theft. But we're like tiptoeing around these issues and tiptoeing around these actual terms. And I'm wondering how much of an impact that has on getting anything done to fight it, especially in our highest offices. Thank you.
So I would say for the financial fitness part, we're using words that are different and calling it financial fitness because of the mental aspect of people already feeling very challenged because it's something that's not a comfortable space for them. So making it more like we just have to work out. You're not going to get to a 5K until you take some baby steps and do half a mile and then a mile. As far as the curriculum, I as the state treasurer do not want to overstep what the curriculum looks like. I think for me, my goal is, let me get it in the schools first, then the next goal is getting the curriculum to actually match with New Mexico culturally, and I want it in K through 12. So it's high school first because we have to take baby steps with everything that we do and do 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Luckily, I like to dance. But it's really important that it's K through 12, that we're talking about math in all different aspects, whether it's science or economics or other aspects. The second component is the universities, which we're partnering with UNM and NMSU right now because of their accreditation to bridge the pathway into a state job. Right now, we do not have enough procurement officers, CFO, chief financial officers, chief investment officers, auditors, budgeters, and that's in all of the counties, that's in the banks, that's in state government, that's in your pension funds. And so what happens, even though the numbers have gone up dramatically on the pay bands to about $100,000 to $200,000, according to the market, some of them up to $400,000 a year annual salary, we don't have the skill set because we haven't been teaching it. We haven't been educating people. And so now you have this crisis of having to hire people from other countries and other states to manage your pension. And so the way we manage our money and how we invest it matters, and who we invest with matters. And if you want to talk about bridging the wealth divide, if you have less than 5% of a $70 billion portfolio with people that are veterans, women, and people of color, and yet New Mexico is a majority minority state, that's a problem. That's where you really bridge the wealth divide. And so all of these things need to be taught in the classroom, but we need the educators to help guide that structure of what that looks like. But that's the dream.
I had one question. It wasn't incorporated, but it is related to the auto debt, Nina Cooper, Office of Equity and Inclusion. I'd read a couple of months ago that the insurance industry was starting to establish their own credit system for insurance and was really horrified about that, because I think we're in enough debt in our traditional credit system, and I also think it's a way to adversely impact communities of color and underserved communities. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about it, if you were aware of it, just how you think it fits in with what you've presented today. Thank you.
I guess one thing that comes to mind, I did not hear about this, but one thing that comes to mind is the intersection between surveillance and these financial products. And so, like, you know, I know that, like, from my insurance company, they said, like, well, if you put a sensor in your car, you know, we can give you a lower rate. And so they'd know exactly what I was doing in my car at any point. And then they could obviously charge me a higher rate if they found that I was, you know, like 5 miles over the speed limit or something. And so, and like, this is happening a lot with other things, right? You know, if you're going to get an Uber or a Lyft and you're going after a baseball game, like, you know that the prices are going to be higher, or when it rains, it's going to be higher. You know, there was a great report that Groundwork, I think, did on Instacart, and when folks are trying to get their groceries, and they had, you know, a room full of people trying to get their groceries at the same time on Instacart, and they were all charged different amounts for the same basket, you know, proving that, like, these companies are watching you, they know what you're doing, and they are, you know, identifying the top price point that you would pay for something and charging you that. So that's what comes to mind with your question, but I don't know enough about the insurance piece to speak on it. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this.
Yeah, again, probably similarly on insurance industries that creating their own form of credit is not something that is shocking to us, and my mind was going the same place as Amy, which is, again, the big words, right? Algorithmic pricing, surveillance credit, surveillance pricing, and what it boils down to is companies who have nearly unlimited access to our data deciding to have, you know, their algorithmic wizards that we never get to see why and how and what's going on, set up different ways to do their underwriting, set up different ways, and it's typically to maximize profit. But we'll have to look into that. Amen.
I just wanted to add one thing on the insurance piece. I went to a National League of Cities, and they had a breakout session with some senators nationally that were talking about insurances, and it's going to hit New Mexico. It's already happening. We were just talking about that with people not being able to get homeowners insurance, especially in areas like northern New Mexico with the fires, Hermit's Peak. They were saying New Mexico was on that map of the states that were going to have the hardest time with insurances, especially homeowners insurance, and coastal states, of course. But New Mexico is in there because of our fire risk. And we're already seeing that happening with business owners in District 6, where their insurance companies are dropping them, citing crime in the area. And then they're having a hard time getting business insurances so it's already a problem. It's going to be, it's a law, a federal law, that you have to have homeowners insurance. If you can't get homeowners insurance, you can't sell your home. If the person you're selling your home to can't get homeowners insurance, you can't sell your home. And we're already having that problem here. So insurances are going to be, it's already a problem.
Yeah, and one of the other things I was going to really highlight here is there's a lot of things that local and state governments can do, but only if they can afford to do it, right? And so one of the big things is ensuring that there are proper accountability and oversight measures when it comes to protecting how public dollars are spent, how budgets are being developed, and how we are monitoring our own bank accounts in the government so that we can then fund these type of programs. So we also have to make sure that we're, putting in we're strengthening oversight, we're strengthening audit protections, we're strengthening whistleblower protections so that we can then go into our own accounts and make sure that, we are protecting against any sort of fraud, waste, and abuse, because we are losing a lot of public dollars to fraud, waste, and abuse that could be going to consumers and borrowers for these programs, right? So it has to start, here too, and then to, Treasurer Montoya's point about we don't have the skill set, but we also have a hard time we can't compete with the private sector, right? So we lose a lot of really skilled employees or potential employees to the private sector because they can just offer more. So the way we can sort of address that is how we, it might not be in pay, but it could be in benefits. It could be in allowing, remote employees, that type of thing. And then it also opens up our pool of who we can hire, right? Because if we can hire somebody who's extremely skilled and willing to, work for what we can pay, but they live in Roswell and not in Santa Fe, we should be doing that. So there are little things that we need to be doing internally as a government and organizations as well, just to be able to get the money that we need to be able to provide these services.
Coupled with your comment, Councilor Telles, and community members are the right people to hold our policymakers accountable to all these things at the city, county, state levels. And so I would just really be remiss if I didn't thank you, Treasurer Montoya, for talking about baby bonds today, because this is the work that PCA will continue to do this year for baby bonds and guaranteed income programming, but also just encourage the city of Albuquerque. I know Bernalillo County maybe someone here in the room is Bernco, but to say, have these conversations in community after 5 o'clock when families can show up and really learn this information, and then take that home and really think about how they can advocate for the ways in which these systems can change for the betterment of their families and their young children. Because we're having this conversation in ways where, we'll continue doing this work. I love learning this. I said I have a bunch of questions because all of this relates directly to the ways that we engage with families and think about what's the work ahead of us as a nonprofit that really wants to ensure families have information, but also have the empowerment and the information themselves so that they can show up to city council, so that they can show up to the state legislature and advocate for policies that impact them directly. So after 5, evenings, Saturday mornings, a little dinner, maybe some childcare for their babies, and let families listen, learn, and speak up to ensure that we have changes for them.
Hi, I'm Anna with the New Mexico Immigrant Law Center, and another request I have, thank you for including all those. Also, when it comes to mixed status families, how this impacts them, doesn't impact them, if they're eligible, not eligible, if someone needs a social, someone needs residence, citizenship, for any of these programs is very important, because usually it comes down to organizations such as ours having to go through, do the research, and do all these things whenever these programs already have these answers. So why not already provide that information and provide it in different languages as well? For example, when I was asking about the student loan crisis, we have so many DACA recipients in the nation, and they're not eligible for federal student loans. They have to get private student loans, but we know that is a huge population and that impacts them, and just it impacts the rest of us whenever it comes to also their financial stability and their financial growth. So please also providing information on how it can impact or doesn't impact immigrants, and particularly your organization if it started during the first administration. I'm sure there's correlations also with immigration enforcement in different areas and how that has impacted just the nation's financial stability as well.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. We did just recently join a coalition that is working on immigration fines and fees, for folks that aren't willing to self-deport. They can be charged up to $1,000 a day just in fines and fees, saddling them with debt and, in the hopes that they would self-deport, right? So yeah, we are working on that issue. Thanks for bringing it up. But also on the other side of undocumented folks not being able to access some of this stuff, I think that's a great point. Thanks for sharing that. I feel like I wanted to say, the private student loan market is about to just explode because of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Folks have now spending or borrowing limits on their loans, and so they're either going to have to not go back to school or turn to the private market for these things, which we know have higher interest rates, fewer protections, and so I think that is really about to just explode, and we're going to see a lot more issues on that front. New Mexico is trying to pass a borrower bill of rights in the realm of student loans, and it was HB 224 last year. It'll be introduced again. We're doing an event tomorrow on that bill in particular, but also there's this free debt clinic tomorrow night from 4 to 5:30 at the AFT New Mexico offices. We would love for you all to join. We'll be sending out an RSVP form after this event. If you can RSVP, that would be great. It's okay. You can also just show up. But yeah, just wanted to plug those two things, or three things in really quickly. I know we're running out of time.
For those of you who are caregivers or caring for, folks, I'm a former sandwich generation caregiver, so I understand that burden. I had to leave the traditional workplace because of it. The state of New Mexico now has a fully funded New Mexicare program, so if you are 60 and older and caring for someone in your household, you can get paid for it, and it won't interfere with any of your other programs that you're required to keep below a certain limit to keep your benefits. So that's another program. So you can get that through the New Mexico Aging and Long-Term Services Department. It's a very simple application. You can call the Ombudsman's office and they can walk you through it. So you can start to get paid for caregiving in that. And it's open now statewide. It was only 3 counties at first, and now it's all 33 counties.
I love these conversations, so I could just go on a long time, but I know that we have past 12:30 and people may have other things, so I am happy to stay here longer and keep talking. But in acknowledging that we are near the end of our time, I would just underscore that I think really appreciate a lot of the feedback about ways to engage community, ways to answer questions and speak to topics inclusively, and to continue this conversation. And we would love to just be a supporter and protect borrowers in any way that we can. My work as a fellow focuses, as I think I mentioned, or may have not gone into this, on engaging local governments, cities and counties. We have a cities partnership with 24, 25 formally cities and counties. We look forward to having Albuquerque be part of this group. We regularly have meetings. We bring in experts on different topics. We dive deep on really timely updates. For example, what's going to change for student loans come July 1st is going to be something we talk about next week. And, this is a huge, we've had the conversation with we're talking about debt and affordability. We're like, well, that's everything, man. What specifically? So yes, we're starting at a really high level point of view, but at least in the way that we work with local governments, we can break that down often into education and direct assistance to borrowers, and that often really resonates with government agencies like an Office of Financial Empowerment, Office of Consumer Protection, and all the nonprofit partners that cities work with. And so that is a venue where we can say, hey, can we do a webinar that goes deeper on some of these topics during an evening? Can we help you bring community together around and find the right kind of speakers? We would be happy to do that. We also engage people around advocacy and around raising our voice. And I think part of that is, yes, listening to people, and yes, engaging people, and also capturing their stories and making sure that our state and local elected officials are hearing from them, and that also we get behind really great bills. So on our borrower bill of rights, we would love to have councilors and treasurers and directors join us in that work, and that is another opportunity for us all to be effective in helping our communities. And then, of course, we need to hold corporations accountable. And I say we, some people are closer, more directly engaged in that work. We look to our Attorney General's offices. We look to other sort of criminal and civil justice helpers at the state and local level. But also, we need to be really engaging legal aid and other nonprofits that are working with communities on their rights and understanding what they can do in situations, and reporting the problems that are happening and then make sure they get in the right people's hands. Anyone else have any thoughts that we really glossed over and really missed? Otherwise, Amy, I don't know if you want to. I think Rada's going to. housing debt, medical debt, right? I mean, absolutely, absolutely. Yes, yes, I know. I think I saw 50% of New Mexico renters are what's considered rent burdened, meaning spending easily more than 30% of their. Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes, so another round, please, for, I'm short, another round, please, for Amy and Jacob, please. Our new partners here in Albuquerque, they literally left us in much better, knowledgeable shape than we were when we walked into the room. And I personally am grateful for them both. I do want to also thank those who are in the room from the Human Rights Commission, which is an advisory board of the Office of Consumer Protection. Thank you so much for being here. And I also need to give, thank you so much. And I also need to uplift my own Office of Financial Empowerment Advisory Board members who are in the room. I thank you so much for being here. I see you and I thank you. And I do love you. But thank you so much for this afternoon of wisdom and a strong call to action, I would even dare say, right? And I started off my remarks with the word of hope, and that is exactly what I think is required. Thank you to our city councilor and our state treasurer and the city councilor who's in the room, and all of you for your time and sharing your wisdom. And thank you to our city leadership, of whom we just absolutely could not do this work without. We appreciate your leadership and your advocacy and your support. Thank you all for being here. This is really, truly evidence of hope and the right alignment for Albuquerque and what we could all do. So thank you for being here. Thank you for the next steps. Thank you for the ideas of what's next for all of us. And thank you for your burdening week. You're going to have a great one, I promise.